Chapter 7. The Echo in Dreams. The novelty of gleaming weapons and cold lights began to fade, replaced by an undercurrent of unease that crept into camp life like Britain's omnipresent damp. It wasn't something easily pointed to, no open dissent or overtly superstitious fear, but rather a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a tightness in the men's shoulders, a faraway look in the eyes of the night sentinels. The wall continued to rise, stone by stone, trench by trench, but something else was being built in the minds of those living in the shadow of the unearthed artifact. It began in the barracks, during the silent hours before dawn, with men waking in a start, drenched in cold sweat despite the frigid air. Their nightmares were not the usual soldier's dreams, enemy charges, the death of a comrade, a barbarian's face too close in death. They were strange, fragmented, illogical. Dreams of falling down bottomless shafts, lit by a pulsing blue light. Dreams of intricate crystalline geometries, growing until they filled the universe with a hum that made teeth vibrate. Dreams of voices. The voices were not clear, not like a centurion's orders or comrade's chatter, but distorted echoes, fragments of phrases drifting in the darkness behind closed eyelids. And most unsettling of all, sometimes those voices seemed to speak in Latin, oddly accented and broken, as if a foreigner were learning the language by reading scraps of military reports or overhearing whispered conversations. Limitem firmare, hostis appropinquat, disciplina ratio imperium. Lone phrases, out of context, repeated with a hypnotic, alien cadence. One morning, a young Thracian recruit was found huddled in a corner, murmuring about the stars that speak in numbers. A veteran from Hispania, known for his stoicism, quietly confessed to Marcus during a nighttime inspection that he heard the artifact's hum even when patrolling miles away across the moor. "It's as if it sings inside my head, Centurion," he said, shame and terror in his eyes. "Am I going mad?" Marcus offered soothing words, reminding them of fatigue and the stress of the frontier. Yet he, too, had begun to experience the dreams. Not as vivid as those of others. Perhaps his discipline granted some resistance, but they were there. Fleeting visions of alien cities under strange suns. The sense of vast intelligences moving among the stars. And always that blue light, that insidious hum. And the voices. Sometimes, at the threshold of sleep, he thought he heard fragments that were not Latin, but something guttural, hissing, and ancient. Dionysius of Alexandria seemed most affected, though in a different way. His work had become a total obsession. He spent days and nights in the makeshift workshop near the chamber, surrounded by diagrams, shards of replicated crystal, and strange measuring devices. His eyes, once bright with curiosity, now glowed with a fevered vacancy. He had lost weight, and fine lines, unbefitting his years, were beginning to crease the corners of his eyes and mouth. He no longer merely documented the Vox Dei's geometric symbols. He attempted to decipher their underlying logic, the syntax of that crystalline language. He filled papyrus scrolls with complex equations and flowcharts that resembled cosmic mandalas more than engineering schematics. And he began to speak of the whispers in a different tone. "They're not random echoes, Marcus," he confided one night, voice hoarse from lack of sleep. They were in Marcus's tent, sharing a jug of watered wine that Dionysius barely tasted. "There are patterns. The entity is learning. It listens to our makeshift signals, our reports. It analyzes our command structure, our logistics, even our idioms." He paused, rubbing his temples. "And sometimes I think it's trying to communicate, not with words, but with pure concepts, geometry, mathematics. But it's overwhelming, like trying to drink the ocean through a straw." He stared at Marcus, and for a moment the fever in his eyes gave way to terrifying clarity. "It studies us, Marcus, not as enemy, not as ally, but as specimen. And I fear it's beginning to find our ambition, our capacity for organized cruelty in the name of order, quite interesting." The wind howled outside the tent, momentarily sounding like one of those distorted echoes. Marcus felt a deep chill. The gifts of the unknown god were not free. They carried a price, and that price seemed to be the silent erosion of sanity, the intrusion of something vast and alien into the very dreams and thoughts of the men who sought to control it. The Empire had found a powerful new tool, but perhaps, just perhaps, the tool had found an equally fascinating subject of study.